And yes, I think I'm recording now. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Yeah, so I was saying Monday last week we discussed histograms. I think I just made one example, and then I think we had like an exercise about histograms, and we didn't have time probably to finish the exercise. But let me just remind you. The definition of histograms. So histograms. So we said, we use the histograms to, display frequency or relative frequency, right? So, so we use histograms to display frequency or relative frequency. Okay, and yeah, just to remind you how to draw a histogram. So the steps. To draw a histogram. Histogram. So first step, well, we need to find, the classes boundaries and their frequency. So step one, we need to find or find the classes boundaries. And their frequencies or relative frequencies. Well, it depends on the problem. Relative frequencies. Okay, and in the step number 2, so to graph the histogram, we need so first we need, there's a horizontal axis, and on the horizontal axis, you're going to put the classes boundaries. So this is where you put the classes boundaries. And then on the vertical axis, you're going to put the frequencies, the frequency or the relative frequency of the class. Relative frequency. Okay. So as I said, I think I did like probably one example last week, and we're having like an exercise. So let me just remind you probably this the exercise. So exercise or example. So I think the exercise was about the goals scored by last season by the MLS teams. So I think we had the following table. So the data. So we have a data, and the data represents the goals scored last season by the soccer teams. Okay, in the, let's say, MLS Eastern Conference. Okay, so in the MLS Eastern Conference, there are like 14 teams, right? So we had the following data. So I'm going to just very quickly remind you of the data. So like we said, like the first team scored like 6 goals, second team scored like 12, then 16. The fourth team scored like 17 goals, 20, 21, 22, then 24, 27, 30, 31, 31, 34, and 36. Okay, so we have 14 teams, and this data represents the goals scored by those teams. Okay. Anyway, so I think we constructed the frequency table of this data, so in the frequency table, we have the classes, boundaries, etc. And so we're gonna need, as a first step, so step one. So the question, of course, is to, you wanna draw the corresponding histogram. Okay, histogram showing, let's say, the frequency, showing frequency. Okay. Anyway, so as a first step, you are supposed to find the classes boundaries. So step one, you're supposed to find the classes boundaries and their frequencies, right? And as I said, I mean, we already computed the frequency table of this example, so we know. So we have like, we had like I think 4 classes. So we had. So here we had like 4 classes. Okay. And then, so in this frequency table, first we have the classes boundaries, and we're gonna need the frequency, right? Now, so for this example, we said, so we have 4 classes, right? So the first for the first class, I think the classes boundaries were was like 5.5 to 13.5. Okay, so the lower boundary here, it's 5.5. The upper boundary is 13.5 for the first class. For the second class, the lower boundary was like 13.5. This is 21.5. So again, guys, we already discussed this like last week, okay? I mean, we already made this frequency table last week, okay? So I'm just taking I'm trying to remind you like the values or the numbers we had last week, okay?
Hey, Mr.
Yes.
I'm late. This is Kathleen. I'm late because me and 3 others was in the other room, the other blackboard.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, no problem. I got you. Thank you. So for the third class, we had the classes boundaries for the third class was like 21.5, and then here 29.5, and then finally we had 29.5 to 37.5. Okay. So we completed these classes boundaries last week, and the frequency. So for the first class, as you can see, there are 2 values, between like 5 or 6 and 5.5 and 13.5. So like frequency of the first class was like 2, frequency of the second class was like 4, and then we had 3, and then finally the frequency of the last class, it's 5. Okay. So this was done again last week. Okay. Now, in the step number 2, so in step number 2, we're gonna use these values to draw our histogram. So step number 2. Okay. So to draw the histogram, we're gonna need a horizontal axis. on the horizontal axis, you're gonna put the class's boundaries. Okay, so we have this number line. So this is my horizontal axis. So it's just a number line, like you have like somewhere, let's say here is 0. Okay, and on this number line, I'm gonna put the class's boundaries. Classes boundaries. Okay. Now, the first lower boundary is actually the first value. Or the first lower boundary is 5.5, right? So I'm gonna put 5.5 on my horizontal axis. So here's my 5.5. Next value, it's 13.5. So here is 13.5. So here, what I'm saying, guys, is that this interval, so this interval, this one here, this interval actually represents the first class, okay? Now, the second class, the boundaries are 13.5 again. So the lower boundary is again 13.5. Then the upper boundary is gonna be 21.5. So here's, let's say my 20, this is my 21.5 right here. So the interval from 13.5 to 21.5, so this interval, this red interval, this is supposed to represent the second class, right? My second class is represented by the red interval. Okay, now next class, the third class, it's from 21.5 to 29.5. So 21.5 is already on my horizontal axis. So I'm gonna put this 29 now, 0.5. So here's my 29.5. And so my third class is gonna be represented by this blue interval, right? Between 21.5 and 29.5. That's like my third class. Now my fourth class, it's like from it's from 29.5. 29.5, it's already on the horizontal axis, but then I'm gonna need 37.5 now. So here's my 37.5. Okay, so this interval, this one here, this yellow interval, this is supposed to be it represents actually my fourth class. That's like my fourth class, right? Okay, so you see, guys, we have like 4 different colors, so or 4 different intervals. So the green interval, that will be like my first class. The red interval will be my second class, etc. Okay, so that's for my horizontal axis. Now for my vertical axis, of course, my vertical axis is supposed to it passes through the 0. So here's 0. So then here's my vertical axis. And on this vertical axis, I'm gonna put the frequency of my classes. Okay. So as you can see here, as a frequency, we have like 2, 4, 3, and 5, right? So I'm gonna put these numbers on my vertical axis, the frequency axis, right? So this is 0, of course. After 0, we have 1, and then I'm gonna have, let's say, 1 right here. Then, of course, we'll have 2 units, 3 units, 4 units, and then here it's 5. All right. That's all I need for the frequency. Okay. Now, now I'm gonna draw the frequency of my first class. So my first class, as I said, the frequency of my first class, it's supposed to be 2, right? So I'm gonna do. Here's my green interval that represents my first class, and I'm gonna draw like a rectangle. And the height of this rectangle is equal to 2. That's because the frequency of my first class is equal to 2. So this rectangle here, or this square, that will be the frequency of my first class. Okay. And again, its height is equal to 2 because that's the frequency of my first class. Now, for my second class, the frequency is 4. So I'm gonna use red for the second class. So the frequency is 4. So I'm gonna draw like a rectangle. Over this red interval, and the height of this rectangle would be 4 because that's the height of the because the frequency of my second class is 4. So I'm gonna get this rectangle right here, and its height is 4 because that's the frequency of the second class. Okay. Now for the third class, the frequency is 3, right? That's 3 here. The frequency is 3 for the third class. So over this blue interval, I'm gonna draw again a rectangle with height equal to 3, right? Because that's the frequency of my third class. Okay. And finally, for the last class, the frequency is 5. So this yellow interval right here represents my fourth class. So I'm gonna draw a rectangle here with height equal to 5. Right, that's the frequency of my fourth class. Okay, so that will be the histogram of this data. Okay, so that's my histogram. And again, this histogram actually shows the frequency of my classes, right? Any question, guys, about this histogram? I mean, I think I'm not sure if we. I mean, I made one example last week, but I'm not sure if we finished this this exercise Monday last week. So anyway, is there any question about the histogram? You see how it works? How to draw a histogram?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Yes, please.
So Professor, in which case we will need the relative frequencies?
Yeah, so as I said, that depends on the problem. So here, like in this problem, it says, well, draw the corresponding histogram showing frequency. Okay, so if it says you need the frequency, then all you need is just the frequency. You don't need the relative frequency. But if it says like showing a relative frequency, okay, then you're gonna need the relative frequency instead of the frequency. Okay.
Yes.
Any other question, guys? All right. So now, so we're gonna describe the shape of the histogram. So there are different terms we use to describe shape of histograms. So this histograms shapes. Okay. So mainly there are like 4 different terms used to describe the shapes of histograms. First, terms used to describe shapes of histograms. Okay, so the first term is it's called skewed left or skewed right. So one, it's called skewed left or right. Okay, so what does it mean, skewed left or right? It means that one end has like more or less higher frequency classes. So one end has more or less higher higher frequency classes. So the idea, guys, is the following. So the shape of your histogram would be like, something like this here. So like Okay, so in this case, this histogram is skewed right, because as you can see on the right side, so here, these classes right here, they have like the highest frequency, right? So the right end has like the highest frequency classes, right? So this is a skewed right. Skewed left would be like, so on the left side, you would have like the classes with the highest frequency. So it would be like, the shape would be like something like this, for example. Okay. So in this one would be skewed left. Because again, the classes with the highest frequency, they are on the left side, right? Like these 3 classes right here. They have like the highest frequencies, okay? An example, guys, you know, for example, we last week, so Monday last week, we draw the histogram of the observed car speeds. And just to remind you, the histogram was like, example. So again, I'm going to just remind you of this example with the of observed car speeds on the highway. And so, you know, we draw the histogram of this example, the observed car speeds on highway. And the histogram was like, I think, so just to remind you, the histogram was like, so this was done, we did this last week, okay? You can find this example in your notes of the last week. So this was done last week. And the histogram we got was like, you know, in this example, just to remind you, we had like 6 classes. So the histogram was like, let me just put here, right here. So we got something like somewhere 0 here, and the classes boundaries are like, you know, 42.5, I think, and then we had 50.5.
58.5.
Excuse me?
No, I just said 58.5. That was the next one.
Oh, so thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah, 58 point, yeah, next one, 58.5. Thank you. And then 66.5, and then 74.5, and then I think it's 82.5 if I'm not mistaken, and then 90.5. The width was 8, right? And then we had like, so here is our frequency axis. And the histogram, the shape of the histogram was like, well, I think it's here, it was like 1. And then we had like 6 somewhere, and then we had 8. Anyway, so I think the frequency of the first class was like 1, right? Frequency of the second class was like 0. Frequency of the third class was like 1 again. Right? And then the frequency of the fourth class was 6, if I'm not mistaken. So this is like 6 right here. And then the last 2 classes, they have like the highest frequency, which is 8, right? The last 2 classes, they had the frequency is 8, right? So this is like 8, and here the same, it's 8. Okay. So if you want to describe the shape of this example, this histogram, then this would be skewed right, because as you can see on the right side, the classes, they have the highest frequency, right? So this is a good example actually. So this histogram is skewed right, because as you can see on the right side, right here, so these two classes, as you can see, they have like the highest frequency, right? So it's called, so the shape is skewed right in this case, okay? All right, so that's for the first term, right? As I said, there are like 4 different terms to describe shapes of histogram. So we have this skewed left or skewed right. And then there's like a uniform or regular. So this is number 2 of the second term. Number 2, uniform. Oops, that's not what I want to do. Right here, uniform. Did I use red for the skewed? Yes, I used red. So I'm gonna do the same thing. So uniform or regular. Okay. So in this case, like the classes, they would have like more or less the equal frequency, the same frequency, more or less the same frequency. Okay. So so in this case, so classes, or every class, they're gonna have like more or less the same frequency. Same frequency. Okay, so the idea would be like, so the shape of the histogram would be like, so the idea is the following. So the shape of the histogram would be like, so it would be like something like this. So you're gonna have like, so as I said, the classes, they have more or less the same frequency. So you're gonna have something like, which looks like, right? It's, you know, so the classes, they have the same, more or less the same, you know, same, the rectangles, they have more or less the same height, right? So, so as you can see here, so the classes, they have more or less the same frequency. Okay, so that's what I call uniform or a regular histogram. Okay, so that's for uniform. And then yeah, there's this mound shape symmetrical. So that will be my next term. So phi, it's called mound symmetrical, mound shape symmetrical. So the idea here is that the shape of the histogram would be like symmetric about the center. Okay, so it's going to be symmetric about the center. Okay, so for example, so the histogram is going to be like, it's going to look like, so it's going to look like something like this here. Okay, so you see here, guys, in the middle. So here, that would be like the center of the histogram. This is like the middle or the center of the histogram. And this middle or the center would be like, it would be like a mirror, right? So as you can see, like this class here, would be like the image of this one, right? And like this one here is almost, it looks like almost the same like this one here, etc. Right? Like this one here would be like the image of this one, etc. This one here would be like the image of this one, and finally, let's say this one here looks like this one on the right side here. Okay, so yeah, so the idea is like your histogram would be symmetric about this the middle class or the center. Okay. And then, so that's for the mound shape symmetrical. And then finally, number 4. So number 4, it's called the bimodal distribution. Bimodal distribution. And in this bimodal distribution, they're going to have like 2 classes with the largest frequencies are they're actually separated by at least 1 class. So the idea here is that 2 classes with the largest frequencies are separated by at least 1 class. At least. So it could be more than 1, of course. When I say at least 1 class, it could be like 2 classes or 3 classes, etc. It could be more than 1. So at least 1 class. So for example, the shape of your histogram would be like, it's going to look like the following. So you're going to have something like, and then you have like 2 classes with okay. So the classes with the highest frequencies or largest frequencies are, of course, the 2 classes with the largest frequencies would be like these 2 right here. So this one here, the highest frequency, and this one. Okay, so these are the 2 classes with largest frequencies. Okay, with the largest 2 classes with largest frequencies, because they are the highest rectangles, right? With largest frequencies. And as you can see, these 2 classes, they are separated by like 3 classes. So they are separated by like this class here, this one here, and this one, right? So they are separated by 3 classes actually. Okay. So yeah, so that's what I mean by bimodal distribution. You have 2 classes with largest frequencies separated by at least 1 class. Yeah, so those are like the main terms to describe like the shapes of histograms. So again, we have the skewed left or right, we have the uniform, the mound shaped symmetrical, and then this bimodal distribution. Okay. I mean, in this bimodal distribution, in the word bimodal, guys, is bi, which means like, you know, you have like 2, like this, you have like 2 very distinguished classes, and they are with the largest frequencies. Okay. All right. So let's do an example. I'm gonna give you like different shapes of histograms. and then you need to describe them using those terms, okay? So exercise for you guys. So all you have to do is just to describe, so exercise. So describe the shape of the histogram using the terms that we discussed, right? The above. Okay, so first, let's see here, number one. And then, so number one, so you have something which looks like the following. So here's your histogram. And it's gonna look like something like this here. Okay, so the question is, what will be the shape of this histogram? Okay, number two, that's the first histogram. Number two, so for number two, you have something like okay. So what will be the shape of this one? Okay. Number three, and the last one. Number three. Right, so let's see. Okay, and so what will be the shape of this one? Okay, so what will be the shape of this histogram? All right, so I'm gonna give you a couple of minutes, guys, to think about this exercise. Just describe the shape of those histograms. Layla, you're saying number two, one skewed left. Yes, very good. Mound shape. Yes, absolutely. Number three. And but you're saying number one is regular. Yes. Yes. That's very good. That's exactly the answer.
From skewed left and mound shape.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. So yeah, number one. As you can see in number one, the classes, they have more or less the same frequency, right? They have the same, more or less same, the rectangles, they have more or less the same height. So number one would be, as you said, uniform or regular. Number two, as you said, guys, would be, skewed left. Number two, it's it's skewed left because, as you can see, the classes with the highest frequencies, they are just on the left side, right? And then for number 3, as you said, yeah, the number 3 would be mount shape symmetrical. So for number 3 here, it's mount shape symmetrical. As you can see, the center, it's symmetric about the center. I mean, the center would be like this, this class right here, this one. And so this class would be like, yeah, this is like the center. And as you can see, so this blue class would be like a mirror in this histogram, right? Like you know, this class would be the image of this one. They have the same frequency. Here, this one here has the same frequency as this one, etc. Right? So like this red one right here, okay, etc. Okay. Any question, guys? So that's anyway. So this is like just the terms we use to describe the shapes of histograms. Now, yeah. So as I promised, like 2 or 3 weeks ago, you know, we know how to compute the frequency, the relative frequency. Next, we're gonna compute the so-called cumulative frequency. Okay, so this cumulative frequency can be in your you can be in your frequency table. So let me just define what I mean by cumulative frequency, and then I have a couple of examples. So let's first let me just first define what I mean by cumulative frequency. Cumulative frequency. This is just so cumulative frequency, again, so it's different from frequency and relative frequency. So cumulative frequency is just the sum of the frequencies. The cumulative frequency it's actually the sum of the frequencies, is the sum of the frequencies for a class and all classes before it. For a class and all classes before it. Okay, so for example, let me show you an example how this works. Example. Okay, so let me use the example with again the observed car speeds. So this is the example. So this is the observed car speeds on a highway. Okay, so so we had, of course, 6 classes. We have this classes boundaries. Okay, and then their frequency. And now I'm going to show you how to compute the cumulative frequency. So this is now the third column. We're going to have the cumulative frequency. Cumulative frequency. All right, so we know the classes boundaries and the frequency and their frequencies, of course. So it's like, you know, it was like 42.5 to 50.5, right? and then 50.5, 8.5. This is 58.5, and then 66 here, 0.5, 66.5, and then 74.5, 74.5 again. This would be 82.5, and for last class it's 82.5 and 90.5. Anyway, so for the frequency of the first class, it's 1, 0, then we had 1, then 6, 8, and then 8. Okay. Again, this was already done like last week. Okay. Now, for the cumulative frequency, so what we do, guys, so for the first class, so the cumulative frequency is it's by definition it's the sum of the frequencies of for a class and all the classes before it. Okay, so if you take the first class, so it's a sum of the frequency of a class. So the frequency of the first class is 1, right? So it's going to be 1 plus the frequencies of the classes before it. Okay, but before the first class there is no class, right? It's the first class by definition, right? So the cumulative frequency of the first class is going to be just the same as the frequency. So it's going to be just equal to 1. Okay. For the second class, the cumulative frequency would be like, so the frequency of the second class is 0, right? So we're going to have 0 plus the frequency of the class before. The class before, it's the first class, which is its frequency, it's 1, right? So it's going to be 0 plus 1. So the cumulative frequency of the second class would be 1. Okay. Now for the third class, the frequency of the third class, it's 1 plus, and now I'm going to take the frequencies of the classes before it. So before the third class, we have the second class, its frequency is just 0. And before the second class, we have the first class and its frequency, it's 1, right? So it's going to be 1 plus 0 plus 1, and that will be 2. All right. Now for the fourth class, its frequency, it's 6 plus the frequencies of the classes before it. Okay, so before the fourth class, we had the third class, its frequency is 1, the same plus the frequency of the second class, it's 0, plus the frequency of the first class, which is 1. So here the answer would be 8. The cumulative frequency is 8. For the fifth class, its frequency is 8 plus the frequencies of the classes before it. So before the fifth, we have the fourth class, its frequency is 6. The frequency of the third class, it's 1 frequency plus the frequency of the second class, it's 0, right? And the frequency of the first class, it's 1. And the answer here would be, so 8 plus 6, that's 14, plus 2, that would be 16. All right, so the cumulative frequency of the fifth class is 16. And finally, for the last class, its frequency, it's 8, plus the frequencies of the classes before it. Before we had 8, then the fifth class. In the fourth class, we had 6. In the third class, we had 1. Second class, we had 0. And the first class, it's 1, right? And so the total would be here 24. So the answer here would be 24. That would be the cumulative frequency of the last class. All right. Does this make sense to you guys? Any question how I got this cumulative frequency? So it's just the sum of the frequency of the class plus the frequencies of the classes before it. Okay. Well, now let's do an exercise, all right? So here's an exercise. So I'm going to come back to the example of the goals scored by the M&S teams. So this is an exercise. So the goal here, of course, to find or to compute the cumulative frequency. Right. So again, we have this example. So this data again represents the goals scored last season in the MLS Eastern Conference by the teams. MLS Eastern Conference. Anyway, so we are interested in the cumulative frequency. Let me write down for you the classes, boundaries, and the frequency. And then you have to find or compute the cumulative frequency. Okay, so frequency here. And then please try to find or compute the cumulative frequency in the last column. All right, so let me just, so the classes, the boundaries for this example are, I think it's, we had like 4 classes, 5.5 to 13.5, 13.5 to 21.5, 21 to 29.5 again, and then here's 29.5 to 37.5, right? And the frequencies are 2, 4. So first class it's 2, second class it's 4, third class it's 3, and then 5. The frequency of the last class. Okay, guys. So please try to compute or find the cumulative frequency. All right, the last column here. All right. Sometimes you're saying 2, 6, 9, and 14. Yeah, that's excellent. That's the answer. Absolutely. Yes. So. All right. So for the first class, the cumulative frequency is just always is the same as the frequency. Okay. First class. I mean, you don't have to think about it. It's just the same as always the same as the frequency. The cumulative frequency is the same as the frequency. So if your frequency of the first class is 2, then cumulative frequency is also 2. Okay. So for first class, cumulative frequency is just the same as the frequency. Now, for the second class, the cumulative frequency would be like the frequency of the second class, which is 4, plus the frequency of the class before it, right? So before the second class, of course, there is one class, the first class, and the frequency of the first class was 2, right? So that will be 4 plus 2, and that will be 6. So the answer is it's actually 6. Yeah, Kathleen, absolutely. 2, 6, 9, 14. Yeah, that's absolutely the answer. Yeah. Yeah, Janabu, that's the answer. 2, 6, as you said, and then it's going to be 9. So that's 3 plus 4 plus 2. That would be 9, as you said, guys. And finally, for the fourth class, its frequency, it's 5. And before that, we had 3 plus 4 and 2. And the answer is 14. Absolutely. Yes, very good. So, all right. So that's for the cumulative frequency, guys. Now we're gonna do the same, like for we use the histograms to display the frequency or the relative frequency. Now we're gonna use what the so-called ogive to display cumulative frequencies. Okay, so next. So ogives. So what's an ogive? Well, an ogive is just it's just a graph. Ogive is a graph that displays cumulative frequency. Cumulative frequency. Okay, so in this graph, so the idea is almost the same as the histogram. So we're gonna have like on the horizontal axis, so we're gonna have the classes boundaries. And on the vertical axis, we're gonna have the cumulative frequency. All right, so let me show you with an example how it works. So an example. All right, so I'm gonna use the previous, this example, the goals scored by teams in the MLS. So I'm gonna use that example right here. So again, data represents the goals scored by MLS, by teams in the MLS Eastern Conference. Anyway, so again, so we have the, probably you can see the classes boundaries and the cumulative frequency, right? I'm just write it down again. Oops. Just write it down again right here. The classes boundaries. And here, the cumulative frequency. Okay, so it's again here. $1.5, 9.5, and then 37.5. Here, cumulative frequency, we have 2, 6, 9, and 14. Now, how does this ogive work? So we're gonna have, so horizontal axis, again, this is like our classes boundaries. Here's 0. So the first class, the lower boundary, it's actually 5.5. So we're gonna start here is 5.5. All right. So this 5.5 is supposed to represent, so here, this is the lower boundary. Then we have 13.5, 13.5. Then we have 21.5, 29.5, and then 37.5. Now, for the vertical axis, we have this cumulative frequency. So it's like, we're gonna need like 2, 6, 9, and 14. So the largest number we're gonna need is 14. So I'm gonna go like, this is like 2, here somewhere, it's gonna be 6, right here somewhere is going to be 4, and right here in the top is going to be 14. So this is, again, this axis, this vertical axis represents the cumulative frequency. Anyway, so so by convention, guys, actually an ogive begins on the horizontal axis at the lower class boundary of the first class. So your ogive, you're gonna start at 5.5. So we're gonna start right here. Okay, that's like the starting point. Okay. Now, cumulative frequency of the first class is 2, right? So I'm gonna put here, so there you see 13.5. So I'm gonna plot like a point right here. And as you can see, I mean, the height of this point, it's actually 2 because that's the cumulative frequency of the first class. The cumulative frequency of the second class is 6. So you're going to take the next point, which is next boundary, class boundary, which is 21.5. And you're going to plot this point right here. And again, the height of this point is actually 6 because that's the cumulative frequency of the second class. Now, for the third class, you're going to start 29.5. And so the cumulative frequency is 9. So I'm going to go up here, up to 9, right here. So that point will represent the cumulative frequency of the third class. And now for the last class, this point here, the cumulative frequency is 14. So we need to go up to 14 right here. So this point here, the height of this point is actually 14 because that's a cumulative frequency of the fourth class. Now, all you have to do, guys, is just to connect these points. So always, as I said, you start at the lower class boundary of the first class with 5.5 right here, and then you connect these points. Okay, and that will be your ogive. So as I said, you always, your ogive begins at the, so by convention, guys, your ogive begins at, so on the horizontal axis, at the the lower class boundary, so the lower boundary of the first class, at the lower boundary of the first class. Okay. So the lower boundary of the first class is 5.5, right? So that will be this point here. So you always start at the lower boundary of the first class. That will be like your starting point. All right. Now, next point would be like, that will be like the cumulative frequency of your first class, right here. This point right here, the height of this point, it's 2 because that's the cumulative frequency of the first class, right? And then this one here, there will be cumulative frequency of the second class. This is the third class, and this is cumulative frequency of the fourth class. Okay, so this graph or this curve right here, that's what I call ogive. Okay, that's your ogive, or ogive of this data. Okay. Can I probably just erase these? These points right here. Okay, so this is your ogive. Any question, guys? Well, here's an exercise. Let's graph the ogive of the, the example of the observed car speeds on highway. Okay, exercise. Exercise. So please try to graph the ogive of the example the car speeds on the highway. So let me just remind you the classes boundaries and then their cumulative frequency. So we had like 42.5, 50.5, 50.5, 58.5, 58.5, and then 66.5. And then here, this would be 74.5, again 74 to 82.5, and this is 90.5. Now, for the cumulative frequency, we had 1, 0, 2, and then sorry, I forgot. Well, what's the next? I think it's 1. Yeah, sorry, 1, 1, 2, 8, 6, 16, and 24. Sorry. So it's 1, 1. So this should be 1, 1, and then 2, 2, right? If I'm not mistaken. And then, sorry. So 1, 1, 2, 8, 16, and 24. So 8, 16, 24. So here's 8, 16, and then 24. All right, guys. So yeah, please try this this exercise. So just try to follow, helps the the previous example. All right, here. Come on. Yes. Yeah, Jainobu, I think you raised your hand.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't see you. I didn't see your raised hand. Yes.
Yes, I have a question.
Yes, please.
Like about the first class, like at the graph, we take 4.5. So why we didn't put that one like for the 13.5, or we don't have to connect the 5.5 and the 2 by the frequency relative?
No, so first you always start
the cumulative frequency. So we do not have to connect the 2 on that one and the 5.5.
Yes, so that's the thing. So you that's like a convention. So you always start. So your starting point, you see right here, this starting point. It's always it's at the lower, the lower boundary of the first class, which is lower boundary of the first class is 5.5, right? That's like the first lower boundary, right? This 5.5, right? So the first point is going to be on the horizontal axis. So it's going to be at this lower boundary. That would be that's like a convention. You always start from there, from the lower boundary of the first class. Okay, and then the 2. You see, then you take the next. So the next value or next boundary is 13.5. So 13.5, you're gonna plot the frequency, the cumulative frequency of the first class. The first class cumulative frequency is 2, right? So that's why I got this point, because the height of this point, that's exactly the cumulative frequency of the first class. Okay, so you have, this is a starting point. This is your starting point. Then this is like the cumulative frequency of the first class, cumulative frequency of the second, third, and then the fourth. Okay, but you always start from, you know, from this lower boundary of the first class. That will be like your starting point. It's always on the horizontal axis.
Okay.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Sure. How much time do we have? Oh, okay. Wow. Okay, the 1 hour 15 is not, obviously it's not enough. All right, guys. Yeah, so I guess I have to stop here, and I will continue. I mean, I will come back to this exercise next time. So hopefully next time I'm gonna finish this section and we can start chapter 3. All right. Yes. So we're gonna meet.
Exercise.
No. You don't have the, so for the homework, I will assign a new homework on Wednesday, but I will come back to this exercise. I mean, you can think of this exercise if you want, for sure. But so on Wednesday, we're gonna meet in person, right? And I will come back. I will discuss this exercise next time. Okay. Thank you for listening, everyone, and I will see you on Wednesday. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. See you next time.